Hello and welcome to the Mockingbird Show. Today we have a guest in this show, and she is Alice Ball, an early childhood educationist from New Zealand. So today Alice will be sharing a little about the play approach that is so useful in early childhood development and also musicality along with play. Before we have a conversation with her, I would like to say a little about Whāriki, which is the New Zealand's national early childhood education curriculum, and it introduces play-based approach which is child-centric. He was introduced in 1996, and it means a woven mat. Education happens from all sides. It doesn't happen from one single aspect. As a result, this curriculum is really, really lovely, and it is very, very beneficial for children in the early childhood years because it is enabling them to develop holistically. It is enabling them to explore, to contribute, to be a part of their own learning process. And I'm so glad that we have with us Alice Ball today from New Zealand, who will talk about play and musicality. She'll be doing a presentation on the same. So I will be introducing her and she will present. And then we will have a short question and answer. So stay connected till the end of this episode. So
Hello.
glad to have you today with us, and it's really really wonderful because the topic that you'll be talking with us about today is play and musicality, which is so vital in the early years of a child's life for their optimum growth. For because play we know is a holistically rounded thing, which is very enabling for the child. So today we have you here in the show, and thank you so much for joining us. So please introduce yourself, and then you may present on your play and musicality. Uh,
Thank
Over to
you.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Acharya. It's great to be back. I used to present with the Early Childhood Development Forum a few years ago, but I've been out of touch for a few years, but it's nice to be back. I'm Alice, and I live in New Zealand, so I'm recording from New Zealand here. It's now evening time, and it's daytime in India right now, so I think I'm a few hours ahead of you. I know I'm 12 hours ahead of home because I'm from England. So yeah, today I'm going to be presenting, and I think I'll share my screen now because that might be the easiest way. So just bear with me once I figure out all my technical slides. Can I just check the screen is there? Is it all good?
Yeah, all good.
Oh, thank you. Hello. So I'm going to be talking about the value of play and musicality for both a teacher and child today. And I'll explain as I go on why I'm including both play and musicality. And this includes like my own personal attachment to this, and as well as my professional learning journey. And I guess when I came to the point where I needed to present, I thought I can't separate the both of them. And I'll explain why as I go on, because it's still an obsession of mine. I'm still trying to figure that one out, like the difference between the play and musicality, or whether they're the same thing. So for me, who I am, I'm someone who has always advocated for lots of play in a child's development. And it stems back from way before I became a teacher. And alongside that, my interest in musicality has grown as well. And I've always, when I was putting these slides together, this kind of ongoing thought was in my mind, where play has always been my invitation and the musicality has just danced naturally through. So with that being said, just a little bit more about who I am before I start presenting, just so you can have a background of my journey. As you can tell, I am English. I am from Manchester, and we're the musical city of England. We've got all the best bands that come from Manchester. I'm sure you know Oasis and James and lots and lots and lots. And I trained to become a teacher at Leeds Metropolitan University back in 2009 to 2013, which doesn't seem that long ago, but for me it feels like a lifetime ago now. And I did my first class honours degree in early childhood development in the foundation stage. I've taught in 3 different countries, England, Germany, and now in New Zealand, where I've been here for almost 8 years, which again, I don't know where that time has gone. And just a couple of years ago, I completed my master's, something I'd always wanted to do, but I just had to find the right time to do it. And in my master's, I did a 40,000 40,000 word thesis. I had to say that twice then just to remind myself, on the value of musicality in child development, specifically looking at the early years and the first year of primary school. And as we go on, I'll continue explaining my research as well. I'm now a senior lecturer in Auckland at Manukau Institute of Technology University, which I'm really proud of because it's been a goal of mine for a while. And I'm a new senior lecturer. It's been a lovely journey so far, and it's been great to train new teachers. And as I said before, play is just a big part of who I am. Today, I've kind of organized these slides into two parts, beginning with me just explaining what I mean by musicality, because I think for some people that might be a new word or it's got many different meanings. And I guess in terms of me and my teaching practice and research, I thought I'd best explain that. And of course, the value of play. But as my career has gone on, of course, naturally, I focused on children, but as I've grown older, and especially since being in New Zealand, I've definitely shined more attention towards teachers and how we play and how we interact with children and the value of that. And of course, the musicality comes dancing through that. So in part two of this discussion, of this presentation, I'll then explain a little bit about my research because, as I said, it was 40,000 words, and that's quite a lot to talk about. But I thought I'll just pick out the best bits which link to this presentation, and of course, just the ongoing implications now and the continued questions I have, and something which I call like my professional curiosities. What am I still wanting to know? Because what I found when I finished my master's was I still had more questions, which is kind of the natural spiral of research, really. So let's get going. Musicality and me, this was actually the first chapter I wrote in my thesis. And I thought the best way to explain what I mean by musicality is using this quote, which I used a lot in my own thesis. I actually ended up doing a dance piece to it as well. And Fates, who's one of the co-authors of Education and the Body, it says, our bodies as the first technology, and in human terms, the human body is the finest machine ever produced. No man-made machine or technology comes close. And I think that's quite powerful because by musicality, I refer to the way we make music, like the way we move like an instrument, and that being for the child and the teacher. I know children express this in the sounds and the music of their play, how they dance in the environment, their body percussion, their tapping, their clapping, and those repetitions of sounds and movements. As I was putting this together, I reminded myself of this little boy in this picture is my nephew. And I've got 3 nephews, and they're a bit older. Well, 2 of them are older now. They're actually teenagers. But I remembered one of my nephews, how he, when he was really young, he kept saying round and round, round and round, whenever he saw a double-decker bus in England. And it was his way of kind of making a connection to the world. He'd obviously learnt about buses or transport, and he'd learnt the song, the wheels on the bus go round and round. And it was like a repetitive sound and movement he kept doing. And I guess that's what's quite special about children, because they make sense of their world through play. And, as Piaget famously said, I couldn't find his exact quote, but I know we all know what, he talked about how play is the work of children. It's what they do to make sense of the world. And I have been fascinated by children's play, and I still am, even as a senior lecturer now. Whenever I go and visit teachers in their practicum, I enjoy still sort of watching children play, because it never gets boring. And whenever I look at pictures from my practice, I often see different things again when I look at what they were doing. Like, for example, in this picture here, it's one of my favorite moments in play, where a little boy in my class had recreated a dinosaur house using lots of various different materials in my classroom. Now, this photo is quite old now, it'd be about 10 years old now, this class, but I still use it, But every time I look at this picture, I see different things, I notice different things. And now this little boy, he used to always create amazing visual structures like this. And I used to always be amazed. And I love how he's got a little stair there, connecting the 2 different parts together with the dinosaurs. he was really talented, and his play expressed that. It modeled that. And I guess something I've always said is children are just so clever, and especially when they play, this is highlighted. The term working theories is sort of more of a new term came to me since working in New Zealand with our amazing curriculum, Whāriki. And I'm sure many people listening have heard about this curriculum because it's quite a global recognised one. And this idea of children making their own working theories about the world is something I learned in New Zealand more because, and it kind of made sense the more I watched children play, like them trying to make sense of things with different types of play as well. And of course, when it comes to play, I think what's often forgotten about is the actual learning in play. I mean, there's that term play-based learning, and it's that concept of the learning in their play. And this is another example of a child from one of my many classrooms. And they were also like the other little child in my other picture. They were very good at creating just lots of visual ways of expressing their knowledge and ideas. This particular child created a game, if I remember correctly, because again, this would have been a few years ago now. And it was basically the main big dinosaur in the middle was the teacher. And they were calling the little dinosaurs to go and find a different pneumacon. For those of you who've never used a pneumacon before, it's one of my favorite resources in the classroom because it's so visual and tactile, and it's good for number, but also lots of different types of imagination. And I thought this was really clever because this particular child, I remember correctly, if you gave them a pen and paper and a worksheet for maths, they may not have achieved the same kind of impact which they could do in their play, because in this play, as you can see, the learning of the number recognition, the grouping, the creativity, the problem solvings. I've often said before, the P in play is practice. As well as it being powerful, it's also practice. Children practicing their learning in their play. Oh, I think I might have gone. Sorry about that. I think I've gone forward too far. But I'll just go back a sec. Sorry about that. Too jumpy. And of course, with the play, whenever I talk about play, I cannot miss out schemas. And since being in New Zealand, a different term came to my mind, because when I trained to be a teacher, I was taught schemas. But a really famous early childhood teacher here in New Zealand, Penny Brownlee, her and Kimberly Chris used the term urges, that urge to play. Something made me do it. Now, I'm sure if you have children yourself, or if you've watched children to play, you often might have seen repetition in their play. Like the rotation, children either moving their body round and round, or moving objects round and round. Or over here, we call it enveloping, where children are filling up water, they're filling up baskets, they're transporting things from one end to the classroom. I mean, that's quite traditional with toddlers. They do that a lot, transporting different objects. And then you've got the course, the construction, the deconstruction, the make-believe play, the connecting. And then, of course, the enclosures, making dens, stacking. This is the makeup of play. It's the process of play. It's how children play. And what I love about Penny Brownlee is when in her writing, she always says, something made me do it. And again, I'm reminded as I'm talking now of another nephew of mine when we were on holiday, and we were in this playground in Spain. And there was this playground had a slide, it had a roundabout, but of course my nephew was just obsessed with this fountain tap, what you pressed and the water would drop. And I can remember him running back and turning it on. And it was that repetitive drop, that trajectory urge of watching things fall down. Now, as I got a bit older in my career, something I've realised with the help of my friends, Reggio Emilia, philosophy, and Penny Brownlee, often taking a second look at these, at children's play, especially their urges and their schemas, and trying to make sense of what they're trying to tell you in their play. For example, movement, there's lots of different types of movement in play with the running, the climbing, and the jumping. I often think, well, the child saying, I'm trying to learn about my body. And of course, with that becomes the music, singing and movement and singing. I'm trying to explore and make sense of my own body and how I can use it. And then, of course, the mixing, the construction, the make-believe play. I feel like when children start to express those types of play in the classroom, especially the make-believe, it kind of tells you like they feel like they have a sense of belonging in your classroom. They're feeling confident to express themselves in this manner, especially in that make-believe, which, can be quite daunting to sort of, act out different roles and sing around a classroom. But I always feel like it's a good achievement in my classroom whenever I start to feel those types of play emerging. But then, as I've said from the start, I really started to look at adults and how we play. And when it all began, when I started noticing the schemas of play. And one of my favorite activities, which I like to do, and I've done this with my students who I'm lecturing at the moment recently, is asking them, well, we've just learned about the schemas of play, the urges. How many schemas does it take to bake a cake? Because, for example, we've got to gather up the ingredients, just like children gather up resources. We have to mix our ingredients together. We then fill up a tin, that's enclosure, and then don't get me started with decorating a cake. There's so many different types of play. Have you watched those videos of adults making cakes and designing different cakes, and it all manifests into these beautiful creations? And I guess play is everywhere, and even us as adults and as teachers. And I guess you may not think of this now as you're listening to me, but if you might think there's something that you do repeatedly. What could you be trying to tell yourself about this? I know for a fact, I'm someone, I bake cakes, but I run, I have to move. I realize like there's a lot of similarities in what we do and what children do. Especially now, this drawn my attention with the World Cup going on, with all the different football chants and our singing and our dances. I mean, I'm an England fan, obviously, and we have many different football songs, famous songs and chants, which are just naturally created when we come together. And I remember when I was writing my thesis, I noticed this through my journaling, just that connection of like, we still have that, that connection of making music and chanting together. Is that a form of play which has carried on from our childhood? So as I've explained, like, is play just for children? Like, I am someone who runs a lot. This is a picture of me back in my days when I was, I like to say semi-pro runner. I was on the track. I did a lot of racing. I still run now because I need to. And it's something that makes me happy, an urge that I have. Just like a child running around a classroom or running outside the classroom, should I say. And, just that general movement. Now, again, I was able to make these connections between teachers, adults, and children through my friends of play. This is a term I've often invited my students recently who I'm teaching. Have you got any friends of play? Who are your favourite authors of play or advocates of play? For example, mine are Penny Brownlee and Kimberly Chris. I love Dr. Alistair Bryce Clegg McGowan, who is based in the UK. He's taught me a lot about the provision of play through resourcing. And of course, the Reggio Emilia approach to third teacher, that is something which I'm passionate about. So I guess I want to invite teachers, what do you do as a play? What is your play, both teacher and adult? So as I've gone on in my teaching career, I've developed my own professional curiosities. The more I've watched children, the more I've thought. And I guess two things it's still ongoing, but kind of led to my master's development was things that I'd noticed in the environment, like why do children sing together? And when they do quiet activities, why do I somehow naturally break into song when I teach? What is the importance of this? And I guess all these professional curiosities led to my own urge to write my master's. So this goes on to my second part of my presentation, where I'm discussing my thesis. And I'd like to explain what I did, how I did it, and key insights. And I suppose I'd better explain that I used arts-based methods in my research, as well as autoethnographic methods, which is sort of journaling, writing for myself, using my own memories to sort of build together in one to get my answers. So my thesis began with a memory of when I was a little girl. And I wrote this at the beginning of my thesis because it was an important memory. And when I was a little girl, I was in 1996, 5 turning 6. I remember my mum and dad separating, and I went to go and visit my dad's new house. And apparently, it's a bit of a hazy memory, but I do remember this. Apparently I turned to my dad and I looked around the empty space and I said, well, there's plenty of room to dance in. And that's where my the idea for my thesis began. because even as a little child, there was something about musicality before I could talk about it, sort of brewing in my mind. And this became the basis of my thesis. So from May 2022 to March 2006, I basically spent a lot of time playing myself. I was influenced by children, and I kept the circling memories from my own schooling experiences alongside my teaching experiences. And I was journaling every day, and I was trying to collect memories to sort of bring together about what I thought about play, education, how children learn, how I learned as a child. And I represented this through arts-based methods. As you can see, I've got I was playing around with the resources, try and recreate my old classrooms. I journaled and voice recorded myself, did a form of self-interviewing. And I spent a lot of time dancing around my kitchen as well, to be honest, because I was trying to make sense of what exactly I wanted to research about. So play and music became two really clear methods for me. This is just an example of my journal extract with Autoethnographic, the way I used it. For example, this was something I wrote in 2023. A couple of days ago, I went for a walk around my local bush park and I heard a tui bird singing. I couldn't help but think that the bird wanted to share its musicality with me in that precise moment through its beautiful song. This interaction caused me to think about the invitations we give each other, whether we dance, sing, act, and move. So extracts like this became an ongoing thing each day, and I use this alongside the many different types of pieces of art I made. And through looking back at my memories of my own schooling experience and my teaching practice, 4 initial themes kept repeating themselves. And these were time, space, making things big, and chairs. Time in the sense of at school, I felt like I never had enough time to complete my work. I always felt like I was being rushed. Space, I don't remember myself having much space to play and learn through play at school. A lot of my play came after school when I was playing out with my neighbours. Making things big has been something that's quite ongoing for me. Like I have to make, like for example, I've got to dance or make something bigger so I can see it or step into something. I can't just go off a worksheet. I need to sort of make it more tactile and visual for myself. And chairs, that became an ongoing thing, like being sat down for most of the day at school. Like I drew this visual here, which went into my thesis because, of course, I was doing arts-based methods of one of the classrooms that I remember being in. And I remember sitting in rows and how that felt for me as a child. And it helped to form a lot of ideas, which then were valuable because with my supervisors, one of my supervisors said, well, why don't we just lay all what you've researched about yourself and your own experience and lay it on the floor and we can play just like children do. So that's exactly what we did. And there's a picture from one of the room which we hired to use at the university. And I literally printed off all my journals, my pictures of the resources I'd made. And of course, I put my dancing shoes on and I stepped into my research. And this was really vital because it helped me then decide what's next. What do I need to research next? What do I need to do next? What questions am I trying to ask here? And I guess it was in the spirit of play and music what helped me do this. And towards the end of this whole session where I'd put all my work and my findings and my wonderings on the floor for me to step into, some questions started appearing, which helped to direct my research. And I guess I wanted to know what kind of new entrant teacher learn about their own musicality and the musicality of children that they teach. Now, new entrant, I better explain, in New Zealand, a new entrant teacher is the first year of primary school, sort of transitioning from early childhood. The children will be 5 years old coming into this class. So that's where I decided to focus on that age group. However, I did, of course, naturally, the early years just danced its way through like it does. And then the second part of my sort of questions were, how do arts-based methods and play enhance a teacher's practice and learning of the musicality amongst their classrooms? So this whole process of play as an adult was really valuable and was inspired from children themselves, from the many times I've watched children develop their own kind of working theories and answers about the world. And this kind of helped to direct the focus of my research, because I wanted to know, how can I help teachers discover their own musicality and what's important about this in their teaching practice. The methods I developed were, it was over a phase of 3 weeks with a small sample of teachers. And I did one initial workshop, which is I basically just invited teachers to play. And I chose resources related to musicality, which would encourage them to be musical. And I kept notes and I played alongside. And then after the workshop, they had time to go off back to their own classroom, which turned out to be really vital, to do some reflection time about what they may have discovered in the workshop about musicality and what they then might see in children, the children in the classroom as they play. We then reconnected and came back together to do a shared interview. And of course, I developed questions. And these 3 forms of methods helped me to find my findings to my research. And from doing this process of the workshop, the reflection time and shared interview, I was able to formulate 3 different themes, which of course had sub-themes. And these were reciprocal play, a professional development experience, and individual musicality. Now, for this presentation, I thought I'd just focus on 1 and 3 there, reciprocal play and individual musicality, because these themselves had some really big findings that kind of made me go, wow, that's really interesting. So, reciprocal play. Now, this was quite a big one, because when I was in the workshop with my teachers, a couple of them were dancing with this scarf, and I've actually put the actual picture of the scarf here, and twirling it round. And then I noticed when I was interviewing some teachers, they then talked about children in the classroom repeating the same type of play. They picked up this exact same scarf and they started twirling. And I thought at first, that's interesting. Is it a reflection? Are teachers and children doing the same type of play? As I gave myself more time to relook at this, I realized that actually the way the teacher was playing with the scarf and expressing themselves in a musical way was actually a bit different to the child. But this finding made me think, whenever I dance or sing, how does that impact child development? How do we, by the teacher being musical and through singing or dance, what impact does that have on the child? Because this finding showed that children and teachers are both singing and expressing themselves in a musical way. But at first it looked like they were doing the exact same thing, but it was more reciprocal because they were still being quite individual, which then led me to individual musicality, which was my 3rd theme. And this was quite interesting for me, because what became apparent through all my participants and teachers was they had noticed that children can be both loud and quiet across their play. It often depends on a child's personality, or it's just the way they express themselves. If you think about children, that's quite obvious. Children can be quite loud, but then children can be quite quiet sometimes, but that doesn't mean they're not being musical. And that brought me back to my wonderings that I'd had whenever I've heard children sing quietly to themselves or in a group whilst in their play, and often wondering, that's so interesting. Why do they all kind of copy each other and sing together? And just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's not musical. And this, and I found this really interesting. And again, the sounds that you hear when children play, whether they're loud or quiet, they may not sound like music, but they're meaningful to each child and they're important. So then my thinking with this theme was, well, can the same be said for teachers? Just because I know for a fact that I'm quite, when I teach, I'm quite loud and I'm quite musical. But then teachers themselves may find their own musicality. It may not be the same as me, but doesn't mean it's not their own musicality, just like children. So I began to make these connections and sort of looking at, well, musicality isn't just one way. It's not this, singing loud and dancing expressively. It can be expressed in many different ways, whether it's just quietly humming to yourself, tapping, it's individual. So this was something that I found, it's still an ongoing thing, just an ongoing curiosity I've got, because I'm still wanting to know more about this. So what now in the early childhood setting? Well, after doing all my research and continuing to advocate for play and musicality, my thing I would tell teachers still is, please don't stop playing, because play is where we find the answers. And through play, our musicality dances through as well. And always providing the space and the open-ended resources to allow this to happen for both you and the children. And the time as well, bringing back to my initial themes of time and space to sing and connect together. And of course, time to learn about you. And I call it teacher time, like discovering, well, what is your musicality? What's your individual musicality for your teaching practice? And of course, 5 questions I ask myself whenever I'm setting up a learning environment is, can my children access my resources? Is there time and space to play? Does my environment reflect the children? Can they influence it? Is my environment welcoming to the community and family? And can I see myself learning and developing in this space too? So concluding today, my ongoing professional curiosities continues. As I said from the start, which comes first, play or musicality? Is it play that initiates the musicality, or is it the other way around? This is something I'm still trying to debate and would love to spark conversation about. And I guess a big finding for my thesis and thus my ongoing career has been, we can learn a lot from children, especially from their play. And of course, giving that teacher time to play, to explore your own musicality and how vital that is. And I guess that little girl there is me when I was a little girl, 5 years old. And I always look at that. It's like the only picture I've really got now of myself when I was younger, because of course I was raised in the 90s and we didn't take lots of endless photos really. It wasn't so easy on your phone. And it just reminds me, I love that picture because, it's someone who I've always been, really, just like, dressing up, the princess in me, the singing, the dancing. And that's still kind of manifested into my teaching practice as with children, and now as working with adults as well, and trying to encourage that kind of connection with them through my musicality. So thank you for listening today. I hope it was informative, and I hope it did spark some curiosity of your own, and of course invited musicality into your own life or teaching practice, whether you're a teacher or not. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing my screen so I can come back.
Wonderful, Alice. Really a very insightful session. I must say it is well based on deep research that you've been doing all this while, and your experiments with teachers, your conversations, your trainings. So I want to ask a few questions. You mentioned Reggio Emilia, yeah, he calls the environment the third teacher. So how can the learning environment inspire musical exploration and creativity? Can you throw some light on that?
That's a good question. I thought I put that down on my slide, but I didn't quite refer to it, did I? And that was something, again, which I used to help set up my workshop in my research, because it was a wondering I had, because obviously when I set up a classroom for play, I've not just thought about musical items, I thought about different types of play. But I guess it's like looking at each area, like, for example, you have your role play area. How can I invite music into there? So I often put lots of pots, pans, cultural dresses, cultural items to invite that cultural musical aspect that children might bring to their class, to their play. And that kind of area. Then looking at maybe like your small world, just the different types of loose parts, which think about noise. How can I create noise and sound? There's a really good article, and I put the authors on my slide, by New Zealand authors, Robin Thicke, who created musical play. and detailing different types of resources you can use and to invite that. And I guess the third teacher, that's Reggio Emilia, but then, as I said, like, the best resource is often the teacher, looking at the way we invite music, the way we sing, the way we encourage it as well. So I guess that's a good recommendation, is starting from looking at each area to play and asking yourself that question: how can music be welcomed here, or what can I put in this place to spark that sort of imagination for children in that way?
Yeah, so generally we see, in class, in a classroom or in a school, in a preschool, every teacher is not really into music and musicality. So yeah, so they have a little bit of difficulty at times when they have to kind of incorporate musicality into the system. So what are some simple techniques that you can talk about? Two, three, you can share with the audience, where this daily routine we can introduce musicality without requiring formal musical training for the teachers.
Well, we're quite lucky now because we've got devices and those kind of platforms where you don't necessarily have to sing yourself, because that was something, because I didn't actually mention this and I should have done at the start. I did my master's, but before I did my master's, I did a dissertation when I was 21, training to be a teacher, on just teachers singing. And that was one of my findings, was that I can't sing, that shyness sometimes. And again, when I link it back to my research, how I talked about loud and quiet musicality, it was really, I remember making that connection. So they were quite, maybe introducing, using more actions, maybe look at your body percussion, like when you do nursery rhymes, and those actions, focus on the actions first, maybe, because children love that and they will join in with you, because again, like, children just love music, like, no matter how they always do. So maybe start by that, maybe create your own song bag with different items that relate to a different song, and pull it out like on a mat time. That's really good. Or again, if you're someone who needs maybe small steps into as well, like just have maybe one song you might focus on each week, and then another one, build it up. Well, again, I think relying on the devices now are so good, and there's so many different apps as well, which really do sort of invite musicality into the classroom.
Right. So those are very, very good techniques that you have given. So, Alice, I wanted to know, like, now we're talking about inclusion. We talk a lot about, at least in India, we are trying to add a lot of inclusion in our classrooms, and even in the early childhood classrooms. So, how do you think can musical play become a tool for inclusion, especially for children with diverse learning needs?
Well, music's, as I know lots of literature say this, so I can't claim I've said this, music's a language which everyone can kind of dance to and speak. And I've often had a lot of neurodiverse children who whenever you play music, they're one of the first heads that turns. It's a way for that, building that connection. And I think, inviting that musical space in your classroom is very welcoming, especially for neurodiverse children. And I definitely think it is should we say, strategy, or a method which can be very, very important in the classroom. And for children who may be non-verbal, they can dance, or they can still, music is it's so naturally inclusive, music, should we say. There's so many different, like I said in my findings with that individual musicality, there's so many different ways that you can express yourself through music, whether it is singing, dancing. Look at how many different types of dances they are anyway. Like there's Irish dancing, contemporary. There's so many different ways we can move and sing with our body. So no, I definitely, it's a valuable, I don't know what to call it, a resource, a method, a valuable just way of being, should we say, in the inclusive classroom.
True, true. So my last question is, I don't know whether I've been working on a peace pedagogy. So I have this peace for early years, where we are introducing peace in early childhood education. So here, I would just want to correlate musicality. How can musicality help cultivate empathy, compassion, collaboration, and peaceful relationship among young children?
Empathy, compassion, there's a lot of things. Again, it comes back to what I was saying, that diversity of music, the different ways we can use music to create a different tone, a different objective. Like, for example, with empathy, there's that just, I mean, I've read so much now and I wish I could give you an exact piece of literature,
Maybe,
just
or
like
maybe
the
just
different tones of music.
just dance together,
Yeah, and how it invites
and be the
feeling.
feel, they feel that harmony
Mm.
in the dance
It is
together, or it's a
well,
culture they're sharing some
well,
down from the culture. Yeah,
like with football, I recently again, like I was watching different fans. If you looked at, there's loads of memes going around Facebook with how the World Cup is sort of bringing people together from different
right.
corners. It's beautiful. So it just sort of, again, it just highlights that diversity. And then with collaboration, I was just thinking then, like, I've often used music as a way of sort of, you know, to review different things really, whether I want, you're going to look at like tidy up time. When you start putting on music, make it into sort of a dance, that sort of invite, they start to copy each other, which is a Reggio
Right.
Emilia kind of term of ripple effects. When one child starts, the rest copies. So, and that's like the beats of music. So there's so many different, I'm just obsessed with it. Like I said, I'm still not really finished with my masters. It's like maybe I need to go on and do more research, but there's still many questions I've still got about musicality in the educational world, but also we as humans as well, which I'm noticing that pattern more. It's not just for children, it's just for humans who we
The
are.
heart,
Yeah.
the heartbeat is the first music of our life. So, all right. So, that way. Well, thank you so much for throwing light into this topic. And I think all our viewers would be gaining a lot. There'll be a lot of takeaways.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time and for sharing this wonderful presentation and for
Thank
throwing light on the questions that I asked you. And we got a
you.
lot of answers. And yeah, see you again next time. Be a part of PCDF. Always, you're always welcome.
Yeah, always. Yeah,
And
good to be back and hopefully see you again soon. Yeah, take care. Thank
take
you.
care. Thank you. Bye bye.